Hey friends, it has been a while since I've put out a fully edited video, actually since the beginning of February, and a lot's happened. I'm giving you some sneak peeks along the way, but it's time that we unfold this whole thing and I tell you where we're at now. Quick thing before we jump all the way in, a lot of you have been asking if I would share how much money this whole project has cost, and the answer is yes, sure. I'll totally do that. Actually, I'll just make a whole video about it in the coming days, like maybe in a week or two. So just be sure that you're subscribed so that you get that update whenever it comes out. Okay, let's start where we left off in the last fully edited video. If you remember, my friend Charles and I were up on this building, spreading out a massive tarp because we had a huge snowstorm coming through. That snowstorm did end up coming through and it wreaked havoc. There was tons and tons of ice. And then also like a week later, we had some major flooding. So it was uber scary. We thought that the building was gonna have some serious damage because water kept collecting in the tarp and then eventually seeping through. We had some spots where water actually made it all the way down to the floor of the building. However, no damage, thank goodness. Okay, after the flooding happened and that dried out a little bit, I moved into the yard and I started trenching for the wire to run up to the building. This was just an absolute disaster. I'm gonna call it that because it was mostly just stupidity. I dug the whole thing by hand. It's a 140-foot trench that's 18 inches deep. We've got some pretty firm ground here. Also, we have a lot of roots, like big trees that I had to go right next to. So it was just a major headache. So if you're considering doing this yourself, just rent a trencher for 300 bucks. It will save you so much time, so much energy, and it'll be worth it in every possible way. Once we finally were able to get him out here, I had him run 3 110s. This was actually his recommendation based off of my needs, but we ran 3 110s and 1 220. The way it's broken up is we have 110 for the light fixtures, we have 110 for the wall outlets in my studio on the back wall, plus the shed. And then I have another 110 set up for my dedicated desk section because if you know what I do computer 3D rendering, not computer, I do 3D rendering, and it just consumes a lot of power. My computer's constantly running overnight, and I just didn't want to have any issues with that, so he recommended that we split it up this way. And then the 220 is for the AC unit. Okay, now at this point in middle of March, I had started a really time-consuming job. A project that I got pulled into, and to be honest with you, I was intending to do the roofing myself, even though I don't know how to do that. I was just gonna YouTube it. We ended up having it hired out, and we did run into a pretty substantial issue in that process. As we insulated and then we're putting on the boards for the top, we realized that the tongue and groove had warped so bad that it was no longer useful. So we had to go a different route. They ended up, I wasn't here for this, so I don't even know exactly what type of plywood they used, but they ended up putting a plywood down across the whole top and then shingling that. I just want to reiterate that this wasn't Allwood's fault that our wood had warped. They say very specifically that you have to use this wood as soon as possible. And we totally would have if we wouldn't have had so many delays with the weather. That's just for you to know. Like, it wasn't really their fault at all. It was just our fault and nature's fault that things got pushed back so long. Next thing that we did was finish the actual kit. We still had to add the decking in the front, add the decking up underneath the eave of the building. And we also needed to add some trim and then put on the door. So we finished all that up. That literally took like 1/2 of the day. We were so close to being done before that. After we finished the kit, I hired my brother-in-law to cut a door in the face of the building so that we could access the shed once we put up the wall. And that's even better than I could have imagined. Instead of buying a door, we just decided to see if we could actually use the wood that we were cutting out of the building so that it would have more of a seamless look and not take away the sleekness of the building. That door up, it gave us permission to frame the wall that would divide my studio from the shed. And so we actually hired, my brother-in-law wasn't available, so we ended up hiring another team to come in and frame that wall and then put up insulation and drywall the entire inside at that point. Next up was the AC unit. And I just can't describe to you just how simple this thing was to install. So this is a Mr. Cool mini split DIY kit. I bought it from Costco. You can probably get it other places as well. But it was legitimately as easy as putting a 3.5-inch hole through the drywall and then out all the way outside. You run all of your cooling cables through there, plus your electricity, and then that connects to the compressor, which sits outside behind the building. And I mean, it's as simple as that. Like, you legitimately just hang this mount, and then the air conditioner itself, the mini split, just pops onto it, and you're practically ready to go. And they have good YouTube videos to show you how to install it. So really impressed with that thing. And also, I mean, it's just insane what it does to this building. Okay, let's talk about the floors. If you remember, the way that the kit has this thing built is that you put the floor on before you build everything else. And I've told you this in other videos, but we didn't protect the floors throughout the project. We just put them in and kept working. And our space is very muddy outside. Remember, I moved a lot of dirt to make this thing happen, so it's just all raw mud. The floors were disgusting. And it was so disappointing because you have this beautiful wood and then you're just staining it with just muddy shoes and everything. So I spent a full day with a belt sander, again, by hand. It would have been probably smarter to just go rent an actual machine that sands your floors really quick. But I did a belt sander on the floor and sanded them all down, and they looked so much better. But I did that both in this room and in the shed, and the difference was just wild. So once I sanded that down, then I just put in a polyurethane coating over it, and I did 2 coats of that, so the floors are ready to go. All right, let's talk about outdoor stain. Remember, this building is none of this wood is treated, so you have to just cover the whole thing with stain to make sure that it stays protected. This is a little bit of a touchy subject, and I want to be completely honest with you. I'm like 70 to 80% happy with the color that we chose of stain. I'm really comfortable dealing with paint colors. I know that, I mean, it's so easy to go get some samples mixed and come back and try it on your wall, and then you have a pretty good idea of what that color is going to do for the room. But with stain, it's a totally different story. You can't buy samples. They just don't make anything less than a gallon, and a gallon's like $70. So you don't have the ability to really see what that color is going to do until you just go for it. And we did as much trial and error as we possibly could. We brought in a piece of wood and had them like do a little test on that piece of wood without making us buy it. But there's really just no way to know how it's gonna impact the actual wood as a whole on this large of a surface. So all in all, I would say that the building at the moment is a little bit too saturated for me. But here's the caveat. Stain, you typically have to go more saturated than you want because the sun is going to dull it and it's going to fade very quickly over time. So for that reason, knowing that we were that it was going to feel very saturated, we ended up going with a full transparent stain. They have transparent, they have semi-transparent, they have semi-solid, and then they have solid. So we went with the lightest color possible, and it still looks this saturated, which is kind of bizarre. Another thing that I'll mention to you is that you may be thinking, man, the natural color looks so good. Why didn't you just stick with that? Well, I learned a lot about this, and as you know, the wood has a sort of a yellow tone. It's a yellow family of wood, and because of that, if you put any sort of polyurethane or clear coat stain on this, it's only gonna accentuate that yellow and make it even more prominent. And I did not want the building to feel more yellow. If anything, I wanted it to feel more birch, more white, like continue that modern vibe. But long story short, that's where we've come to. I'm like, I think I like the color that we chose, but I'm excited to see what it looks like faded out. Okay, I'll quickly end by mentioning what we've been working on the inside. For the vibe of this place, I've just been considering it to be somewhere between 80s modern and a Japanese Zen house. And if you know me, you might not. These might be the first videos that you're watching of me, but I have sort of an eccentric design style. I am a designer and I like to just push the limits and go down some weird paths. This one is a little bit different to me. I have resale value going on in my brain, to be honest with you. Like, we are living in this house, it's not our forever home. I want this to be something that's really appealing to the next person that looks at our house in 5 years or so. So I'm going a little bit of a safer route. I wanted this to feel very muted, very calm, and yeah, just not so wild like my other spaces that I've designed. So I've chosen a very safe but 80s cream-based color for the walls. And then I also had my brother-in-law build out this shelving unit on the back side. And yeah, basically my thought on that was that I want to have some really design-centric moments. I'm on Zoom calls all the time, and so I want something to be behind me and allow my personality to show while those are happening. But I also didn't want something that takes up a lot of space in the room. So these, being only 8 inches deep, allow you to do that. They give you the ability to just turn your wall into art and without being so intrusive to the rest of the space. And it fits the whole Japanese Zen part of this design. As far as the inside design goes, we still have a long way to go. We're just at the beginning of that phase, but I just wanted to give you a little sneak peek at where my brain is, where we're heading with this whole thing. Well, there you have it. That's where we're at so far. I'm so glad you guys have been following along with this project. It's been really fun to have some people to show this to. The space is totally move-in ready. And in fact, I'll be editing this video from in here today. Like, I will have my computer set up in here today, which is just so crazy and so exciting. We do still have things like finishing up the trim and then adding one more touch-up paint where we kind of mess things up as we were putting in the shelving. But now it's just time to do the fun part and make this place feel on brand for me and adds those fun elements to it. Please send in any questions that you have. Again, I'll be making that video about the pricing and everything, and I'm sure I'll just keep making videos about the space overall as we go through. But just something to leave you with. I want to let you know that this kit has been phenomenal. I have no connection with Allwood. I have no reason to give them a good review. I was testing this out purely from an experimental standpoint, and I just want to let you know that I was blown away by the actual kit. Everything else that went into it, like the electrical and roofing and all that stuff, that was the hard part. The kit was the easy part. They did their job at making this thing become a reality very quickly. So it's just fantastic, and I wanted to leave you with that. I hope you have an amazing week. I'll see you next Tuesday.